Hello, I am Guillermo de Cervantes. I am of the Kingdom of Trimeris in the Shire of South Cape. And today I'm going to share with you an intermediate course on pyrography. The reason I'm dubbing it an intermediate course is I am going to be sharing with you my craft as I'm performing it, and hopefully I can share with you some of the techniques that I've developed over the years. And this is my workstation. You have the fire, which I have been caring for about an hour or so. Should be ready to work. I have several safety measures in place. Just have to always constantly monitor the fire. And below we have the actual work that we're doing. I'm moving you so you can see better. This is a chest that I've been working on for about a year and a half. And the pyrography is an art form where you're taking a metallic rod or iron and you're heating it, and you're using that heat to create artwork. We use the term pyrography because you could do it on wood, you can do it on bone, you could do it on leather, whatever your preference. I have done the shading and lines for the front of this work, the sides, and then the top. Today I'm going to be focusing on the back. And so you can see the back is just a line burn. I'll be shading the back of this today with you. But every time I work, I start off with this strip because I want it as black as possible. However, it is a very boring part of the task, so I do a little bit every day that I work until I get tired of it. The goal with your fire is not the fire, but the heat. The heat is what will make your irons ready. Now, you will notice that I have 3 irons in the fire. Each of them is the same. These particular irons are designed for shading. You see the triangular shape, and it's flat like an iron that you would use ironing your shirts or pants. It's very flat, and you may apply it to the sides or straight up flat, but that's what's currently in the burner. I have 3 because the irons stay hot only for 7 seconds. And you can do a lot in 7 seconds. But while you're working with 1 iron, you want to have 2 irons in the fire, always heating up so you can continue to do your work. Time is one of those abstract tools that I'll be talking about. I mean, a literal tool like a hammer or a chisel, or in this case, the iron rods. This rod is flat and square, good for diamond burns or square burns, geometric patterns. This fluid is good to get the fire going, but after a while you don't need the fluid, you only need your bellows. And this is a beautiful bellows I got from a la Amazon. In one day, I was very happy. The point being is these are tools that you use. For my fire, I'm using a cauldron The witches of Macbeth would be proud. I'm using a metal plate to protect the table as much as possible. And I'm using coals, different kinds of coals. We have the traditional coals that you would use in a barbecue, quick lighting coals. But I also have wooden oak wood, which is burning very slowly and for a long time. And I also have wood chips, like these. These wood chips are very handy. So if you haven't guessed, what I'm doing is called period pyrography, the old school techniques. And I think it's time to do some work. So again, I'm focusing right now on this strip, as you can see, and from your perspective, it probably looks black, but I can see with my naked eye little details where it's not as black as I want it. And so I have to burn over and over again. I'm hoping you can see the little smoke whiffs that come from the work, and the dimensions. Any spot that looks gray to me, I'm burning over it and over it and over it every time I work. You see? Look at that. We're getting a good run on this one because these irons have been in the fire for some time. Sometimes they will get red hot, which is very cool. And they'll last a long time. But sometimes they'll only last for a few seconds, depending on how much you're working. Right now I'm using the side of the iron, opposed to the back end, just to get a corner. And that's all she wrote. Now it's cold. So, it's a little dance that you play between feeding the fire more coals to keep it alive, hitting it with the bellows to keep it hot, and then doing the work. It becomes a monotonous routine, but it's almost like a meditative trance after a while. From the angle right now, I don't know if you can see the beautiful orange coals that are deep in the fire. One of the goals that I have and techniques that I use is to keep a opening, almost like a donut, in the center of the coals, so that when I apply the bellows, it will go, the air will go all the way down to the bottom and heat up the coals throughout. So you have a donut of coals around the sides and an opening down the middle so the air can go throughout. That looks so pretty. All right, let's see. It's looking pretty good. Seeing a few spots. I use that one, so I'm working in clockwise fashion. This one should be pretty hot. Let's see what happens. Woo, look at the fire. Look at that. Now what I mentioned earlier about abstract tools are tools that you can't pick up and use, but they're tools that you use in pyrography nonetheless. And in this case, an abstract tool is time. Only have 7 seconds. Now, when you're doing the work and you're pulling out the poker from the fire, it is, of course, at its hottest. And that's when you have to be the most careful. Not the time to do delicate work. Good time to do what I'm doing right now. A good strong burn, deep lines, but not very delicate time to work. But as it cools, you can change to a different part of the work when it's just hot enough to just make a line. That is, then you could go to another part of your work and maybe work on, let's say, a wisp of a hair or a whisker or some minor detail, because it's not too hot for that bird. And so in 7 seconds, you could go from working on a deep shading, dark, to, as it cools, a wisp of a line. So you could do a lot actually in that 7 seconds. You see, it's already cold. So we go back to the dance of the fire. Now I have these 3 pokers crossed so that they will keep each other in the fire. So they're crossing each other just the right angle to anchor themselves in the fire. Very pretty. Another abstract tool would be space. Right now, I'm in a beautiful porch. Why is that important? Well, if you look outside, it's raining. And if I was trying to do this outside, I'd have to run for cover. So because I'm on the porch, I have a nice shelter to do my work. And I have ventilation so I don't choke on the smoke. And I have the space to work on the project. So abstract tools are the things that you can't necessarily put your hands on, but they are the things that you need to use nonetheless. Light is another one of those abstract tools. So right now I'm working. I'm in Florida, also known as Trimaris, and it is about midday. So I have lots of light. But there have been times where I've worked at night, and you might need to get a lamp. So having enough light to do the work, that is important. I think this is good for now. I'm tired of doing that. Let's get to the real fun part. We're going to be shading this today. And a short while, I'm going to be alerted to go inside, because I want to show you a little bit about modern pyrography, the tools that we use for modern pyrography. Okay, I think you can see that. Let me move you a little bit over. Okay, let's put it a little bit down. All right. So, my inspiration for this work comes from a 13th century Italian chest. This is the inside lid of that chest. I'll show you it in detail once I go inside. And the chest was a wedding chest. And this is an image of knights who are camping outside of Jerusalem. You can see Jerusalem buildings in the background, and they're in tents. These knights are in tents, and they have their shields and their armor, and I just was taken by the image. That is very important. When you're looking for a project, you must find a project that inspires you, particularly in the art of photography. And that is because you're going to be doing it a long time. And you don't want to get sick and tired of an image. You want to use an image that you've fallen in love with, because you'll be living with it. As I said, I've been working on this for 1.5 years. I project it'll take me another 6 months to finish, to replicate the image that I've shared with you. What I've done differently here is I've taken this image, show it to you again, and I've wrapped it around the chest. So this guy in the center, he is the front of the chest. And these two knights are on the sides. And these knights on the far sides of the image, I've used, ta-da, for the back of the chest. So they're sitting back to back. And that was a little creative liberty that I've used. So the first step to doing your work is to draw the image. The next step is to burn the lines, which is what you see here. I took this straight edge iron poker. Excellent for doing lines. It is also good for doing curves, line curves, but it's the tool that we use to do line burns. And that is how I did these. And yet now we're going to do shading. I've also gone through and I've looked at the image and I've used a pencil to mark the areas that I need to burn. So, working in clockwise fashion, taking the next poker. These are dark pictures, so I'm getting to it. I'm using the side edge of it because there's not a lot of space in this. These look like epaulets for the armor. Very fancy armor he's wearing. And I'm using just the tip to get in the corners. Now, I cannot sit down when I'm doing pyrography because I need to move around and get the angles. I need to bend and twist. So this is the part of the conversation where I have to give you a disclaimer. Pyrography is not for people that have back problems or respiratory problems or arthritis. This is a craft that requires you to bend and lean and twist. And so keep that in mind. And I say respiratory problems because even though I'm outside, I haven't been taking care of my fire. Let's put that back in. Even though I'm outside, I'm still dealing with fire. I'm dealing with smoke, charcoal. If you're an OCD person, this is not the art for you. This is a very dirty, dirty hobby. And I mean that in the cleanest possible ways. You're gonna be covered with soot. Sometimes your house may smell of burnt wood. And if you're an OCD person that doesn't like the dirtiness of life, maybe this isn't the craft for you. Oh, that's so pretty. I love looking at the fire when it's orange. Okay. I'm gonna give that another coat, as it were. Hit it again, make it darker. See, right now the smoke is coming up from the wood. So you got to be mindful of that. Ventilation, another invisible tool. Because the wind will help. Normally when I work indoors, I need to have a fan. I just moved recently and I need to buy a fan. So I don't have one yet. So we'll have to suffer. Look at that, it's already kind of cold. But you see, this is a good time where it's just hot a little bit. It's good time for doing like gray colors. I'm gonna show you. This is, so it doesn't have to be black and white necessarily. Oh, it's hotter than I thought. I'm again hitting it with the side of the iron to try to fill in the gaps. If I laid this flat, I would be outside the lines. I want to be inside the lines. So it's kind of like coloring in a coloring book in a way. I've drawn the lines and now I'm just adding the burn for the color. Okay. I think we need to feed the fire a bit. Get some wood charcoal as opposed to the barbecue charcoal. Get it with the. Want to see something fun? Oh, it's too low. Let's move you up just for a little bit. I just love doing this. It's fun. Just for fun. It's pretty. Safety tips. Some people might want to use heat-resistant gloves. As I said, I have this pan. Underneath the fire, I have a jug of water. Or you might want a bucket or a fire extinguisher. And so, safety first, always, in the SCA. So, alrighty. Working clockwise, I think we're on this one. Oh, we've lost track. Let's see. No, I used that one already. Switch. Next one. You see the benefit of having three? Well, that one is heating up. These two are ready. Again, I'm just using the tip to get in the angles for the shoulder. These shoulder pads, I'm sorry, it makes me think of the 80s. Not the 1880s, the 1980s. Shoulder pads were popular in the 80s. Am I dating myself? That'd be boring. Okay. If you make a mistake, as Julia Childs used to say, don't cry over broken eggs or spilled milk. Just keep on moving. Keep on trucking. Might be able to fix it later. You see here now it's almost grayish because it has cooled. Sometimes you might want a gray texture. And so you might want to wait for the iron to cool to get that gray texture. I don't want that now, but it's time for the mellows. I can be out here for 4 to 6 hours. You get into a place when you're doing the work, the fire is ready, the irons are warming. It gets very exciting, actually, to be able to enter a kind of meditative trance while you're working on the fire and burning the wood. It's very validating. And so, before you begin, you need to prepare a little bit. For example, you have to have your hydration ready at all times. I got a big mug here of water. Before you work, you want to have a full tummy. Because as you become obsessed with the work, you'll stop forgetting about little things like eating. Pardon the crudeness, but use the bathroom before you work. You want to prepare yourself physically to commit to the work for a long haul. If you have a loved one that you live with, maybe they can bring you a sandwich because you won't be thinking of those little details. And it'd be nice to have somebody help you out because you're going to be so preoccupied with what you're doing, you won't have time to think about it yourself. So, just food for thought. I'm using the tip. Be very careful because I'm right next to the arm. I want a dark burn right now, which is why I'm just diving in, but I'm applying the corner of the iron as I go along the edge on the inside of the line. This is a tunic. It's a striped tunic. And so I'm burning the stripes. As you see, I have to go upside down now to get this corner. Again, using the tip of the burn. Very soon, a little cooking timer is going to go off, and we're going to take a step inside. And put it flat. I'm putting it flat because I actually have the space to. Look at that. Okay. That's a good dark spot. Isn't that nice? All right. And let's see if I have any more heat in this. No, but a little, just enough if I wanted to do grays. You can see it's burning this ever so slightly. I don't know if you can see the detail, but you see that's a little gray right there. If you wanted grays, you would wait till it cools and then apply the iron. That's not my interest at the moment. I'm going for the deep, dark burns. Okay. Woo. Thunder. Thor is watching. I think seeing a few examples of the burn, I think it's time to go inside. I will be monitoring the fire as I'm inside. It's all one space. So when oh, there goes the bell. Perfect timing. So, we're gonna carry you to my computer. Okay, I'm going to show you a few images. Just one moment. I'll wake up the beast. Okay. This is an image of a gourd from Peru. From 300 BC. First example of pyrography that I can find. Let's see here. This is a harp from Ireland, the Mary's harp. You can find replicas of it in a museum. You can see the detailed topography in the images. Now, you'll note that it is painted, but the paint is accenting topography. It is not covering it up. More details of the harp, and very close, so you can see the imagery, the control, the patterns. Very lovely. This is the chest that inspired me, a 13th century Italian wedding chest. You can see the image is somewhat replicated in front of the chest of the knights outside of Jerusalem. And this is how it looks from open. You can see this is the image I'm working from, the inside lid. And there's a lot more detail to come. I'm doing the shading. The next step for me is to do edges and lines in the background and punctures around the castles. It's almost like pointillism. I have a very sharp, pointy iron that I'll be using for that. So lots of work ahead of me. This is my first attempt at the image using modern tools. This is a table that was awarded to the victor of the Shire of Southkeep's tournament of three ships heavy weapons tournament, won by Jarl Ari. I was very proud to hand that over as his prize. And this is one of my first pyrography attempts. You may be familiar with the tapestries, Lady and a Unicorn. There are 6 tapestries. I replicated that this image on the back. It's a headboard for a bed for a friend of mine. This particular tapestry that I replicated with Pyrography was the tapestry of touch. Each of the 6 tapestries is dedicated to one of the senses. Notice the detail work of the animals. It's almost a contrast to the background. This was a failed attempt. I say it was a failed attempt because it was a lesson learned. This is the Pyrography work done, but then I painted it, and that was a mistake. As nice as maybe the painting is, you lose complete attention to the Pyrography work that is beneath it. It was a mistake. I needed to listen to myself and not to others, and I regret it. But my mother loves it. It's in her house. I do like how the unicorn came out particularly. So this is a Spanish chest from the I think it's the 12th century. This has an interesting combination of ink work and Pyrography. So you can see the burns for the squares and the lines, and then they used ink work inside, almost like painting. It's a very interesting combination of Pyrography and ink work from Spain. So those are some examples of historical Pyrography. One day, hopefully, I can go to a museum and find some better examples. Right now, we're moving indoors to show you some modern Pyrography techniques. Pardon me while I plug you in. There we go. All right. Please forgive the transition, but this is a little bit of work that I've been doing for the purposes of this class. I want to illustrate the stages of Pyrography first. This is a wood spoon, and I took on the project of burning wood spoons with the image of a rose. I did a bunch of them for a future event to pass out as tokens to very special people. And so as you see, this is a spoon that it's made out of bamboo. I picked it up at Publix. I picked up whole sets of them. And the next step is for me to draw the image of the rose. So here we have a drawing of the rose. Now, you don't necessarily have to be an artist. You can find images and transfer images by use of copy paper, or there's special paper that you can, or stencils. There are many different ways of transferring images. You don't necessarily have to be an artist to do what I'm showing you here, if you use the right tools. So this is just a drawing of a rose. The next step is to actually burn that drawing in, which we see here. So I've taken that drawing and I've used a straight edge that I showed you earlier. So it's a little bit different with modern tools. And once you draw and you burn the straight edge line drawing into the image, then you do the shading, which we have here. And the shading is where the image really comes to life and pops. I'll tell you the secret of shading. First off, you must decide on where the light is coming from. So in this case, the light is coming from up here, coming down. The shading would be
on the opposite direction from the direction of the light. So wherever the light's coming from, that you would do the shading on the opposite direction, opposite side. So in your mind, another abstract tool, you have to figure out and decide where is the light coming from, and the other side is where you're shading. Okay. So these are the tools that I use for modern. Trying to get a good angle here for you. Oh, there we are. Basically, they look like soldering irons, right? They're electric. I have two going right now, prepped. One with a straight edge, which the straight edge, just like with these irons, you have to use little nibs for your edges. So this is a straight edge nib, which you would use for straight lines. Straight edge. Then you have the flat nib, is what you use for shading. Again, just like the one we used outside, it's very flat like an iron. And again, you might use the tip, you might use the sides, you might use the whole thing. That's the tool that you use for shading. You have all other different kinds of nibs. This is a sharp and pointy nib for the pointillism, poking. This one is a rounded bulbous nib, maybe for circles. Or you might find them with different geometric patterns. Like this is kind of a diamond shaped pattern. This one looks roundish, and you can play with the patterns. So the reason I like this particular edge, this particular iron, is because you have a control knob. So you can control for the heat or the amount of heat that you're using. On one of these irons, I have a straight edge. The other iron, I have the shading. So hopefully I can show you a little bit of both today. Now you don't have to have two irons. You can have one iron, but if you do, I would suggest you keep a pair of small pliers on hand and a plate, so that you can, if you want to change the nibs, you can change them quickly just by, spinning it. Or you might need to tighten your nib, like this one. Looks like it needs to be tightened. Okay, so along the theme of roses that I've started, I have started to work on this particular image. So I pre-drew the picture, and every class I do, I'm doing a little bit more of burning. Now, my last home I had a ceiling fan, and that is perfect, because as we burn, we're going to get smoke. I have to invest in a small fan because the smoke does get a little bit bothersome. But so I would suggest, if you're going to do this, either have a ceiling fan or a small fan just to blow the smoke away. So, and if you notice, I've wrapped the wire around my wrist a little bit, just so that it doesn't get away and I have control. And as you work, you're going to be turning you have control of the nib, how much pressure you use to push or to twist for circular motions. Right now I'm working on a leaf. If you notice, in this case, I can move this sucker around, and I can sit down with modern pyrography. Outside I can't do that, but here I can, especially because it's a smaller project. So I feel like I need a little bit slack. I'm burning a leaf right now. I'm doing a little twisty action. How much pressure you apply is relevant. because you may want to get a deep line when you start, and you might want to have a soft line when you finish, so that you can have in this case, a little thorn sticking out. Oops, you can't see. Just make this lower. That's better. All right, so what I've done here is I applied a great deal of pressure at the beginning, and I lessened the pressure as went to the end of the line. So I have a little thorn right there. Now I'm going to apply pressure at the base of it for the next line. And with a little twist of the wrist, I do it. So, where are we? Sorry, I'm finding the image for you. So we're right here. I have a little thorn there sticking out, and another little thorn there, very subtle. And I brought the line to the edge of the stem. Now, one thing you want to think about as you're working is you're not done. I might have all these lines finished, but I have to edit my work. And so as I work, eventually I'll get to the place where all these lines are burnt in. But then I need to step away for a little time so that I can come back with it with a clear head and a critical mind to critique and look for little details, to make sure that all the lines that need to connect are connected, and all the shades that need to be shaded are shaded. And so this is a part of art that requires a great deal of discipline and for one to be able to critique oneself, to create a piece of art to the best of your ability. Many people skip that stage and they don't take that effort, and their art will suffer for it. Okay, this is the outside leaf. Lessening the pressure. Oops, not long enough. I'm very lightly touching it because I want another thorn. So it's very dark, and right here I started to lessen the pressure of the burn until I got to the very edge. The next line, again, it's a little twisty action. Lessening for a little thorn. The twist of the wrist gives you the shape of the line. This is a quieter art form, not like blacksmithing or leatherworking, which has some pounding action. Okay, so you see here how we have a little bit of lines coming out to make it look like thorns. And I did that by applying pressure at the beginning and lowering the pressure at the very end, just enough to make that little line. Okay. I like that I can move the board around to get a better angle. So, bumpy road here. I try to make it just one line as long as until I get to the very end. Possible. Now it's not an exact art form. So if your burn does not go exactly with what you drew, that's okay. I mean, it might end up even being better than what you drew. But you have to be flexible and roll with it and make decisions as you go. Okay, now, so I've done one side of this leaf. Now I'm going to do the other side. Now this particular image is a little bit confusing because you have some leaves overlapping others. So I'm focusing on the top leaf right now as it's coming off the stem. This side is a little bit more confusing. So I'm not applying as much pressure because there's more detail. Just a light tip. I think I'm going to lower the temperature on here. This is why I love this particular tool, because I feel like the line on this side should be smaller and thinner. So I've lowered the temperature of the gauge so my burns won't be so dark. I'm giving a little bit of time to cool. Let's see how it goes. And I'm not going to apply as much pressure. I'm only going to lightly touch. That's much nicer. It seems to have, this side leaf has much more detail. I don't want a thick burn on this side. And it gives a nice contrast to make it come to life. One side is a thick burn and this side is a subtle burn. And again, with a twist of the wrist, you're able to do curves and bends. And this is a longer, very long line, and a big curve at the finish. Whoa. So the curve, I did part of the curve. Okay, so let's take a look at what just happened here. See, the line isn't as deep as this line because I turned down the temperature. It was a long curve, but at the very end they had this little bend. I couldn't do it all at once, so I just did half of it, and then I just did the other half to capture that little bend in the action. Well, we're about out of time, but I do want to show you a little bit of shading before I finish. So I'm going to switch to the other iron. I'm going to show you some shading with a stem. Now, I've already drawn this line and burnt a line. I want to shade this side of the stem. Got the heat. So of course, I mean, it might be obvious, but the benefit of doing modern tools is that you don't have to be bothered with a fire and you can work constantly. You don't have to stop and heat up the nibs. Again, I'm using the left side of this nib as I'm going down this edge, and I'm basically just filling in the blank, filling in those two lines. I'm blowing on the nib because the smoke is going in my eyes. I'm just going down the line, burning it all the way down. I need a fan desperately. All right. Okay, so you look at what I just did. That filled it in very nicely. It almost filled it in completely. Now, I could go on to other things, but I'm not satisfied. My little editor in my brain is telling me I need to fill out that line completely. And so I have little spots here. So I'm going to turn this sucker over, and I'm going to go down the other side. Do the same thing. I'm using the edge of the nib, the very edge of the nib, on the opposite side of the line, and I'm going to go straight down just like I did. So, because this spot, I wanted it as dark as possible. Okay, let's take a look at how that looks. Oh, that's good. Nice and dark. See the contrast? So when I use contrast, that is an artistic reference. You can see that the line is very dark and this part of the stem is very light, and that is a good strong contrast between the two. Whoops. Sorry. So you have this, let me rephrase that. You got this dark line in the light of the stem. The dark line is shaded, and that is a nice contrast to the light of the stem. So that's an example of how we might use shading. Another example is, I have to show this to you, it's important. Again, using the side, right now I'm going to use the right side of this nib, going along this line of the rose, but I'm going to gently let it burn the side, so left side. I'm not going to emphasize the left, I'm going to let that just kind of fade, and so you're going to see a shading technique here. I'm just burning on the right side. And I'm going to let the left side fade. So it looks like a shadow. So the right side is hard, the left side is soft, to give the illusion of a shadow. Now I'm going to just touch it slightly and lightly, because I want it to look like it's a fading of the light, so that it goes from dark to light. Not doing all of it because we're almost out of time, but it's an important technique. So you can see that the dark line shades on the bottom, from the dark to the light, as it goes from bottom to top. And that shading is value. And that's what will give the rose a personality and life and dimension, much like you see here. So today I demonstrated to you some period pyrography with a cauldron. Hello, and I showed you how to use the tools of pyrography, and we discussed some abstract tools such as time and light and ventilation, space. I was able to show you a few images of historical pyrography from the ages, and a few images, demonstrations of how to do modern techniques. If you wish to message me at any time on the Book of Face, I'm known as Guillermo de Cervantes, and you can feel free to message me. and I'd be able to answer any questions that I can offer answers to. Hope you've enjoyed the class. Have a wonderful day. God bless.